Hello YouTube, Chris here, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a video on the difference between a freewheel and a cassette. This is something people commonly get wrong and are very confused by. So I'm going to clear up here what the difference is between the two and how you can tell and what tools are required. I'm going to show you how you can tell just from the freewheel or cassette as well as from the wheel in which both would be installed on. We're going to start right here with our freewheel. This is a Shimano 7-speed freewheel. It's all one piece. Nothing is loose here. The central bearings are inside the freewheel. So this is actually what drives the motion of the freewheel, is everything inside of this one-piece freewheel. This is a thread-on system, so on the back you'll see these threads here, and then we'll show you on the wheel how those go on to the actual wheel. But everything is one piece. This is a one-piece unit. Back in the day, you used to be able to replace just the inner rings, which I guess you still can if you can find a source for them. But nowadays, these are pretty inexpensive. They're mostly on cheaper bikes. So if this wears out, if the bearings are bad, the pawls are bad, or it's not giving you the desired action you need, you would usually just throw this away and get a new one. We go over here to our cassette. Cassette is a little different in that it's much lighter. It doesn't have any bearings or moving parts in it. This is just a series of little tiny chain rings. So this here is an 8-speed Shimano cassette, nothing fancy, but similar to our 7-speed. Gearing ratio is a little different. It's just what I had handy. But here you can see you have a lock ring, and again we'll show you on the wheel how that's going to attach, and then just a series of rings. Now these are sometimes separate, sometimes all separate, sometimes all together, and sometimes half and half. Just depends on the cassette you're dealing with. A 7-speed will usually have one or two of them loose and the rest of them clustered together. It doesn't really make a difference. They all go on the same. Before I go over to the wheels, let's talk about the tools required for these. On your freewheel, you're going to use for a Shimano freewheel at least, your Park Tool FR1 or any variant of the FR1. Basically, you take your 12 spline tool, goes down in the center of the freewheel, and this is going to untorque the threaded freewheel. Because this is threaded, you don't need to hold it still, you don't need a chain whip, you don't need anything like that, just the tool and something to torque it with to get it off. So that's all you need to remove your freewheel. On your cassette, same idea, but all your bearings are in the wheel, so you do need a chain whip, and I'll show you that when we go to the wheels. But use a different tool. FR5 or any of the variations, if you're talking Park Tool, will do a Shimano cassette, and just fits in the lock ring and unthreads it. The threads on your cassette are on the inside of your lock ring, not on the inside of the body of the cassette. So that's what we're working with there. Let's hop over to the wheels here and let's discuss the difference on the wheels. So this here is a freewheel compatible wheel or hub. What you can see is right at the hub here, you have a longer axle sticking out on one side and a threaded, right here, area that will hold your freewheel. If I were to mount a freewheel on this, I'll take my freewheel from before, slip it over the axle, and a little grease does help with this, but I'm just doing this for demonstration. And this will just thread right onto the body of the wheel. Now to torque this, you're going to take your FR1 Park Tool, put it in the middle, put a wrench on it and torque it, and this will be tight. To remove it, same thing, you just detorque, untorque with the Park Tool FR1 until this comes off. As I mentioned before, on your freewheel, all the bearings, everything is enclosed in this freewheel. So the hub has bearings for the axle, but there's no bearings for any of the freewheel action. It's all concealed inside your actual freewheel. So here we have our cassette compatible hub. Looks a lot different. This is going to be a Shimano splined hub all the way around. All these splines are the same, except you do have one small spline right here that ensures the cassette is aligned properly. But as I mentioned, all the bearings, all the moving action, the pawls are all inside the hub on your cassette. The reason they switched from a freewheel to a cassette is they started adding more speeds to the rear of the bike. So you were very limited with how much you could pack into that one-piece freewheel, so they started adding it to the actual hub itself, making it larger. So freewheels are typically 5, 6, 7, or 8 speed. 8 speed's pretty uncommon. Usually 5, 6, or 7. Cassettes can be anywhere from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or even 12. So a lot more variations you can do with a cassette. Oh, and not to mention you can do single speed with either. But a lot more variations you can do with a cassette, a lot bigger gear range. The one I'm working with today is just a 7-speed, but if you had a higher end road bike, you could definitely do 11 or 12 speed on there. Let's show you here how this works. So you're going to take the cassette, as I showed you before. We're going to slide. You have to line up that small, the small spline with the small gap there. Put that on. Some of the cogs, as I mentioned before, are loose, so you're going to put those on after you put the whole main cluster on. Your lock ring next will go right on the top. I like to get this started with my fingers. And then you're going to take your tool, FR5 from Park Tool, and tighten it up. Now you're going to want to put a wrench on this and torque this to 40 Newton meters to get it properly torqued, but for demonstration purposes, don't need to do that. To untorque, this is a little different. Unlike a freewheel, this is going to spin freely if I try to turn this to the left and untorque this cassette. So I need a tool called a chain whip. This is my chain whip here. It's basically a piece of chain that wraps around and a piece of chain to hold it. So this wraps around the cassette. The small piece here will lock into the cassette, and then you will use your wrench. I didn't torque this down all the way so I can use my hand, but this allows this to hold the cassette still while I untorque the lock ring, allowing me then to remove my cassette. Well, that about wraps it up for the difference between a freewheel and a cassette. I hope this was helpful to you and you learned a little bit about the difference between the two and when they're used and what everything looks like for each of the different components. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask down in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe and like it. And I'm going to make some more similar to this with more helpful bike tech tips. Thank you.